All right, for the green group for lesson 30, I'll go ahead and I'll give you the lesson, read you the example problems, and you're going to pause the video to do the example problems. Once you've worked the rest of the problems in that section, then unpause the video and continue on with the lesson. Once you've gotten to the end of the lesson, make sure that you ask a teacher to check your work before you move on to the independent work. All right, so starting in your textbook, go to lesson 30, part 1. You can see that these are word problems, and each problem is going to tell about two numbers and a letter. One of the numbers is circled, and you're going to work the problems just like the other ones you've worked. What you're going to do is you're going to set up the number family without reading the circled number, and then you go back and you have to figure out. So the instructions say to make a number family, and then you have to write the addition or subtraction to figure out what F stands for. So you can't just make the number family, you have to also figure out what it's worth. You have to do the addition or subtraction to solve for what number it is. So in order to do it for A, when we're reading it by skipping the circled number, it says that F is more than 56. So if F is more, that means that F is the big number and 56 is the small number. So now that I've placed those two, I go back and I see the number 12 is circled, and that goes on my line as a small number. So in order to solve to figure out what F is, now I have to take these two numbers, and since they're both small numbers, I would have to add the two small numbers to figure out what the big number is. So when I set that up as a column problem, I'm going to set up 12 plus 56. And when I add those together, 2 plus 6 is 8. And 1 plus 5 is 6. So that means I come back here and I cross out F and I write the answer is 68. So this is a complete working of A. You have a number family that's been completed, and you have the column addition problem also. So go ahead and pause the video here, solve the problems for B, C, and D. Once you're done with that section, come back for part 2. Okay, so the next part is part 2 in the textbook, and you see that there's a number that's circled next to each rectangle. So what you're going to do is you're going to start with the circled number to write the multiplication problem. So when I'm trying to do the multiplication for these two sides, I'm going to write this one first. So go ahead and solve the multiplication for A and for B. And then once you've written it the one way starting with the circled number, then you're going to write the other multiplication problem. So you have to write it both ways. You're going to write it the first one, this times this, and then also for A, you're going to start with the non-circled number times the circled. So you have to write the multiplication two ways. So you should have two problems for A and two problems for B. So pause the video and solve the problems for A and B. You should have 4 multiplication problems in total, 2 for A, 2 for B, in order to have completely solved this problem. So pause the video and come back for the next section when you're done. So for part 3 in your textbook, each of the rows here have pennies at the end. So what you're going to do is you're going to count first the bigger numbers. So like if these are dimes, you're going to count 10, 20, 30, and then you switch to counting by ones to add on the pennies. So go ahead and find out how much change is in each row. So write an answer for A, B, go ahead and solve all of them. Remember that you have to put a cents sign after your number. So and solve for part 3. Pause the video. When you come back after this section, you'll need to have your workbook ready. Okay, so for this part, we're going to start lesson 30, part 1 in the workbook. And what we're going to be deciding is we have to decide all of the options of what the letter can be. So we did this before where it says here that R is smaller than 15. So if R is smaller than 15, I can only circle the numbers that it's possible for R to be. So if I'm looking at the first one here, the number is 17. 17 is not smaller than 15, so I know that I should not circle 17 because it cannot be less than 15. So that one's not it. The next one here is 15. But because 15 is equal to 15, 15 is not smaller. And it says that it's only smaller than 15. So 15 is actually too big, so I cannot circle 15. So the next one is 13. 13 is smaller than 15, so it is possible for it to be 13. The next one here is 1. And 1, if I picture it here, 1 is smaller than 15, so that means that R could also be 1. So for A, it could not be 17 or 15 because those numbers are not smaller than 15 like the equation shows, but it could be 13 or 1, so I would circle that. So go through and give yourself the test for each number that you see and ask yourself, could it be this, could it be this, could it be this, and then circle the ones that it could be. So pause the video, work out part 1, and then come back for the next section when you're finished. So for the next for part 2 in your workbook, you have to read the description of the rectangle. For A, it says the rectangle is 9 miles high and 5 miles wide. So you have to decide how to draw it. You have to put your numbers here, decide which one is going up and down, whether it's 9 or 5, and which one is going side to side. You also have to make sure that your rectangles make sense, that if it's higher than it is wide, that means that the number for high is longer or bigger, which means that this side should be longer. If I draw a rectangle that looks like this, that shows me that all the sides are equal, and you're not really showing me that it's higher than it is wide. So your rectangles have to make sense. So if the number for high is bigger than wide, this line here should be longer. So you're going to draw your sides for the rectangle, put your numbers here, and then when you're done, you're going to write the multiplication problem on the line here, and don't forget your units. So pause the video and then come back for the next section when you're done. Okay, so for part 3 in your workbook, these are all number families that have a small number of 5. So when you are using your touch math sheet, like I know that you're going to now that I just reminded you, you are going to use it to count backwards because we're missing small numbers. So that means when I'm missing a small number, I need to start with the big number and then work backwards down the arrow. So if I'm starting here, I'm going to have 10 in my head, and then I'm going to use my touch math to count backwards by 5. So 10 is in my head, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. I fill in my small number here. You're going to work all of those, A through L. And then on the last line here, you're going to write your subtraction problem for this column. So here, I start with my big number. I'm going to solve the number family first. So I've got 7 in my head. Then I'm going to count backwards because we're subtracting. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. I'm going to put that in. And now I have to write the subtraction, so I know that I start with the big number, and then when I'm writing subtraction, I'm going to start with the big number. Minus 5, because we're working backwards down the arrow, and equals 2. So for this column here, you are going to write this subtraction fact for how you solve the problem. So go ahead and work on that part, and then when you're done, come back for the next section. Okay, so for part 4 in your workbook, these are subtraction problems. So make sure that you're going to start in the ones column and read it very carefully. If the problem is one that you cannot work because maybe the top number is small and the bottom number is bigger, then you're going to have to borrow. So you have to decide when is time to borrow and when we don't need to. So solve all the problems for part 4. This is the last section for this lesson, so once you're done with part 4, you need to check in with a teacher so they can make sure that you've finished all the sections and also check to see if you need to go back and rework any problems. Once you've gotten a go-ahead from the teacher, then you can go on and do the independent work for lesson 30, which is in your textbook. So that would be your homework for tonight after you've been checked for a teacher. All right, make sure to ask for help if you need it.